Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 2, Episode 3 of Only Murders in the Building. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, this episode starts off with some levity, trying to continue to find out who murdered Bunny. And obviously, I love that you have Oliver trying to make Miss Gambolini a guest on the podcast, and it's like it's not working out. And it's like right. Maybe you don't need to talk to the Miss Gambolini like yourself. Maybe you need to talk to Miss Gambolini as Bunny. And I love that back and forth. Oliver and Charles are doing impressions of Miss Gambolini. What the F happened to me? Another one was like, Miss Gambolini, why the fuck am I dead? It's like, and what was it Oliver said? No, you have to connect the smile to the dead eyes up. Make sure that the smile doesn't go up to the dead eyes up here. I just love it. And it's so mean. It's so effed up for them to kind of go down that route to the point Mabel had to be like, stop doing that. Stop it. So now they have to basically backtrack Bunny's day. And honestly, it's actually a really heartbreaking thing because Bunny popped in from here and there throughout season 1. She wasn't a main character. She was a recurring character. And this entire episode mainly revolves around Bunny because it's her last day as the last day she was alive, the day she died, was her last day as board director because she was stepping down. And at first I was curious like whether it was intentional or non-intentional. I mean, was it voluntary or non-voluntary? Was she being forced? It seems like it was a voluntary situation. But the reason why the episode is sad, because like Bunny, anytime she popped up, she was just mean and just like, ugh. But then when you actually take time in this episode, you're like, wow, there was actually more to Bunny. I mean, to be fair, and I think that's kind of a good example to kind of always kind of keep. That no matter what people you might, whatever side you may see of people, yeah, people may have mean sides to them, but people are layered. People are complex, that there are different sides to them. Like that guy, was it Tommy Yo? Like, oh, Bunny, we should go catch a game sometime. And she's like, yeah, maybe some other time, Tommy. Like, I'd like that. And it's like, the fact that she had connections, she had people, the fact that she's balling up that aluminum foil and she shoots in the basket, she's like, boom, you see such a fun side to her. Yeah, she can be mean, like the whole back and forth with Lester, but even later on, Lester was like, I took that as a joke or threatening to fire me. Her and Uma, I brought it up last episode, I'm like, are you guys really friends? But they had that very like, oh, fuck you. Well, this is me, and they go their separate ways, but it's like, it's almost like, oh, like, she's like, I can always break into your like place and try on all your clothes or something while you're gone. Because she was legitimately going to miss having, and Bunny's like, oh, you're going to miss having me around or something. It's like, yeah, she was. I guess they legitimately were friends. Once again, I don't know if they grew up in Arconia together or not, but yeah, even a moment she had with Nina, which turns out like Nina, I forgot to talk about Nina at all, but Howard was like, oh, you think Bunny's a bitch? Nina and her were kind of cut from the same cloth, like, oh, don't worry, like, when you're gone, Bunny, I'm going to make sure to give him just as much hell. But she was seen as, like, the bad guy. But for her, it's just like, right, the Arconia has a reputation, and she just wanted to protect this place because it's something that she loved. Obviously, it runs deep in her family. Her mom was the previous board director, and it got passed to her. But as we learned last episode, it isn't just like, oh, Bunny's the manager of this place. It's like, no, like, this place is in her family. Her grandfather built it. It got eventually passed down to her mother, who eventually passes it down to her. So it's a legacy. It means a lot to her. And she even has this conversation later on with that guy, the one she had given him money. He was like, oh, this is too much. She's like, no, go buy that DJ equipment you want. He's like, and she's basically like, don't just love one thing, because eventually you'll lose that one thing, and then once that happens, you'll have nothing. She was obviously referencing the Arconia. It's like, right, outside of that, like, this is the one thing I love. It's all I had in my life, and now that I have to kind of give it up, she's thinking of moving to Florida to kind of retire, And once again, she gets chastised by people because it's like, yeah, here's Mabel, Charles, and Oliver recounting like everything about them taking down Jen. There's a few of their fans out there, and I love Marvin like, oh, I thought you were the killer at one point, Bunny. About also I what was it? He was like, I don't like women in positions of power, and it's like, Jesus, Mark, what would you? It's just like Oliver being like, shush, and Mabel being like, no, don't stop. So And even what was his face, like kind of the head honcho, like the main guy of the fans being like, oh my god, I just got bunnied. It's like, oh man, Bunny talking shit to me. Oh man, it feels so good. And just everyone else is just kind of like, oh, Bunny. And even Oliver making that remark later on of like, oh yeah, like you and me were lifers in the building. The fact of the matter is, once you die, everyone will be able to smell your rotting corpse or something. I was like, Jesus, Oliver, that's literally one of the last things Oliver ever said to her, and was like, that's super fucked up. Because I love that she's like, oh yeah, because he's like, oh, do you remember my son Will? I was like, oh yeah, he's the one that broke a window when he was 10. And Will's like, how does she know about the window? He's like, and Oliver's like, because she's a witch, I tell you, or something like that. Like I said, like getting to see Bunny and her teaching Nina all the ins and outs of the building. It's like, okay, that needs to be replaced. Avoid so-and-so. He's a compulsive liar. He said that he toured in Iraq. What he means by that is, Ben, they're not bad. So-and-so's will say like, oh, you'll bring up a story about her husband and then about her boyfriend. And she's going to want you to ask. Don't ask. But giving, Nina the lay of the lands because it's like her last day. But you can even tell like it is kind of hurting her to kind of let it go because she's been watching over this place for so long. It's been a part of her life forever. It's been, yeah, she hasn't been like obviously managing it all that time, but she grew up in this place. It's once again, it's her legacy. It's in her family. It's just in her DNA, in her blood, Then there's that moment in the elevator where, obviously, there was a situation where the elevator stopped and Charles is panicking, being like, all right, oh my God, there's a breeze, so that must mean we're getting air. Don't worry, the firefighters will get us. And she opens up like the thing and she starts messing with stuff. And it's like, oh wow, Bunny, you're a badass. And she's like, which is funny, I said baddie and Bunny. It's like, bad Bunny. Regardless, the fact is, then she's like, oh, I thought I was just an old cranky bitch or something like that. And Mabel was like, yeah, I knew I'd come to regret that eventually. And then Charles says a line of like, what will we do without you? And in that moment, Bunny was like, you know what? I hate the heat. So it was her deciding she didn't want to go. And I love that little get-together. Everyone, the therapist, one of the other residents, Nina, and Howard. And Howard's like, yeah, she probably didn't like the fact is I brought Mr. Gambolini in here, but Mrs. Gambolini needed like wanted to kind of join or whatever, and the therapist dude is like, you are a very lonely person, aren't you, Howard? And he was like, excuse me. I'm like, poor Howard. Oh God, because like he personifies the animals too much, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that's like a therapist what dream of like, oh man, there's a lot to analyze there. But when the time came, they also pointed out some interesting things, and I'm curious what is going to happen to them. Obviously, there's talks about Amy redoing Sting's room, the room that used to belong to Sting. Then there's also, what are we going to do about Tim and Jan's apartments? And Bunny wanted to stay. She wanted, and Nina was saying like, right, you can't let go because this is all you have. You're a relic, because Nina wants to take over the Arconia and bring it into the 21st century. I'm assuming it's kind of implying like Bunny's captive, because it's kind of probably like and maybe this kind of plays into the story is I'm sure the Arconia is kind of seen as like a landmark that it's like there's so much history there, and so she wants to keep a lot of like its prestige and what it is to it. But Nina she's like, right, we're going to like modernize it and monetize it. Obviously coming at it from a very like obviously millennial standpoint, most likely, to make this place more profitable and change it and do all this and that. I wonder would she lean into like once again the Arconia murder stuff of it. Like it seems like Bunny kind of steered away from that, but I'm wondering would she lean into it to try and like turn it into a little bit of a tourist trap, maybe not. Because she did, like I said, mention monetizing it now would be one way to monetize it, but maybe there's other avenues and revenue streams that she's planning to apply. And Howard is writing all this down, so all of this, having gotten Howard's minutes, it now puts them in a position where it's like, okay, so Nina looks more and more like a suspect, and I love that. I won't even remember what it was, but I love that. Oliver like said like, oh, did like this pregnant person, like he did a whole bunch of P words back to back. The God, I always forget that word. alliteration? Is that the word I'm thinking of? Maybe it might be alliteration. I don't remember. God, I forgot I had so much of English class. Okay, so I looked it up just to make sure I wasn't completely wrong. Turns out I was right. Alliteration was the word I was looking for. Either way, and I love that he's like, oh man, I think I've gotten better since Tim's murder. I'm like, it's kind of messed up for you to say that with Mabel right there. Mabel just kind of like shakes her head in disappointment. But it's just kind of like, it feels like you should still be a little more sensitive about, throwing out Tim's murder. But it's, it's like, at the very least phrase it, it's like, oh, our last investigation. But I guess it's like, yeah, he's kind of Oliver kind of being this selfish person that he can be sometimes. He's just kind of like about him and doesn't really think about other people. Either way, so Bunny kind of got ripped a new one by Nina and all that, kind of calling her a relic and stuff like that. But when the time came, like, she was listening to our trio, like, partying it up, and she comes over and she's offering her champagne. And I immediately was like, oh, she's offering that champagne. She actually wants to come in and have fun. And they didn't realize it. And they were like, well, we got something for you, Bunny. Here. And he gave her a hoodie. And I try it on. It's like, oh, look at you. And they're like, okay, well, thank you. Bye. And they leave. And it's like, wait, you don't think Bunny was asking to join us, do you? And they're like, what? No, there's no way she was. Oh my God, she's still out there. Well, what do you do? This is awkward now. It's like, and then she starts crying. Oh my God. It's like, I never took Bunny as a whaler. And it's like, well, what do we do? Like, come on, we can't just let her stay out there and cry. So they go out in the hall, but she already went back in her apartment. And they're like, well, yeah, but what if Bunny comes back and they don't want to, well, that'd be awkward, so maybe that's why they were partying on the rooftop. Now that is that thing of now in retrospect, when they had said like, oh, let's go back to Bunny's last day, and they all kind of looked at each other at the beginning because they remembered like, right, we didn't all treat Bunny the best. And that's also the sad thing. I mean, it's very reflective of, right, that last moment in the elevator between Mabel and Tim. Like, because you never, and it's that thing of like, you never know when like life can strike and you never know when it's going to be somebody's time. It's like, in no shape or form, like with everything going on between them, Mabel had no idea all the stuff that Tim was up to, nor did she know, like, oh, well, obviously Tim was in the process of dying because he had already been poisoned at that moment. All of that, right? So you just don't know, and it's like, right, that moment, and even later on, Charles playing it back, obviously from the episode, saying like, right, like, we could have saved Bunny's life with a little bit of kindness. She probably would have been up there celebrating with them, and she wouldn't have been alone and easy target to be murdered. And Charles talks about her being this person that knew a lot. You might kind of think she was a certain thing, but like, she held so many secrets, she knew so much. And you're cutting back and forth between that and Mabel saying at the end of last season, being like, man, aren't there some loose ends or something like that? Feels like there's loose ends, which I still don't 100% know what that's in reference to. So I'm wondering, is something with Tim's murder or just everything last season going to tie into stuff this season or not? But and sadly we see Bunny getting attacked. Whoever it was someone that knew her, because she was like, what the fuck are you doing here? So I'm like, I don't think it's going to be Uma. I don't think it's Nina. Because someone did ask her about the painting, and I'm curious who that is and what that's about. I'm so curious. Just like listing off the suspect right now, like maybe it isn't too obvious like who it's going to be, but I can't even. I feel like it's probably not a character we haven't been introduced yet. It'll probably be a character we see over the course of the season. I don't know. I feel like it has to be someone we have a decent enough time knowing. But obviously they're not going to come at it from like the Jan perspective again. So that's why I'm almost like, would they make it a character you've seen frequently enough? Like, it has to be someone we know just so the murder like has more impact. Because if it's just someone you don't know, it kind of takes away from it a little bit. Like, Jan ended up being the murderer, like, hit a lot because of everything between her and Charles. And it was a character you got to spend a little bit of time with and kind of get to know, and just to find out, oh, she's the killer. Once again, it's just like, it's actually a really just sad episode, and I think they designed it on purpose of like, right, everyone's got this misconception of who Bunny is. Perception is the word I'm looking for. Our perception of who Bunny is. And now let's use this episode to make her sympathetic. Once again, people are layered. They're complicated. Yeah, people can be mean, but there's from time to time, they also have a good side too. We have no idea just kind of like Uma said, like she was just lonely, and it's like no one knew her. It seems like the only person she would like. Other people saw Bunny somewhat for who she really was, but that's also what hurt Bunny about the whole. Which I love, like Bunny called Nina a bumpy bitch because being pregnant and stuff like that. But it's kind of almost like what Mabel said to her at the end of last season. It's almost like she threw it in Nina's face because all the time they spent together, their walks where it seemed like they were friends, they were on the same page. It was like, oh, you were just lying and saying everything you knew I wanted to hear just to get your way. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us, where the investigation ends up taking us going forward. Obviously, this is all tied together, the painting and everything, and obviously might have something to do with Rose Cooper. And I wonder, did he ever find out what his dad got actually arrested for then? Because obviously, if that was the building that Rose was in, maybe that has something to do with who she was seeing at the time. Maybe we don't know. We know Lenore was in a relationship at the time, maybe, because Charles is still trying to figure out whether or not Bunny was his sister or not. He had talked about that thing of oh yeah, they accidentally kissed and they were also drunk, and that kind of leads a whole place. And Mabel was like, I can either slap you or we can move past the part where you're like, thanks kid, I needed that. He's like, yeah, let's go with the other option. She's like, cool. So we'll see whether Charles finds out whether Bunny was his sibling or not. I don't think she was, because that also seems like, because her mom made a point of we were having an affair, but that might have been just from the perspective of well, Charles's father obviously was married, but maybe Lenore was too. We don't know if Rose Cooper was in a relationship or not either. So there's a lot there. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I'm like, well, there is the introduction of Alice. I meant to kind of end this early, but now I'm sitting there well, not unless it ends up being Alice, because this is all related to a painting. At the very least, she'll probably end up being a suspect and now be a complication. And once again, I brought it up last episode. I'm sure Mabel and Alice aren't they're going to have a bumpy road, but I think something's going to put her in the middle of all this, because it's also it's Cara Delevingne, and you're just kind of once again you do your typical murder mystery police procedural thing where you go well, it's going to be this pretty prominent actor in it, isn't it? The actor, oh, this is a recognizable person. It's she's a pretty big name actor and actress and model, so you're it might be Cara Delevingne, or at least kind of playing with your expectations of that type of thing. I guess, to be fair, the Sting situation of it all last season was kind of that. It's there's no way it's actually going to be Sting, because it's usually not the first person you suspect. It's usually 2 or 3 rotations into that, or sometimes it actually is, and you just kind of get lost in the investigation along the way, because that could always it's probably 50-50 on how that can kind of turn out sometimes in murder mystery investigations. Either way, ending it here, like I said, I'm a lot of stuff to kind of keep in mind going forward, but really that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.